Good evening and welcome to the evening version of Ways and Means. Committee Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Backus. Assemblywoman Brown-May. Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblywoman Gorlow. Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Howdigi. Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblyman Peters. Assemblyman Watts. Assemblyman Yeager. Chairman Romarino.
And I am here. Thank you all for your patience. And tonight, members, we have some bill introductions. Right now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of them. 2 of those 5 are bills that will be starting in the Senate. They are part of our budget bills, but you'll get a brief overview of what they are tonight. But we will start with BDR 341202, and that establishes provisions governing capital projects of school districts. Any question on that BDR introduction? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
You need a motion. You need a motion.
Oh,
Motion second.
I need a motion.
Madam Chair, I would so move.
Thank you. I have a motion from Assemblywoman Backus, a second from Assemblyman Watts. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. That's our easy one. Enjoy that one, because it goes downhill from here. Our next, and we will have a quick overview from our fiscal staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next presentation is related to the Authorizations Act. We will have our staff come and provide the committee with a general overview. This is not a BDR that is being introduced in the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means. It will be in Senate Finance, so there will be no vote taken on this. Once the presentation is done, if there are any questions, our staff is here to answer any of those, and then once they're done presenting, they're going to go up to Senate Finance, where this will be introduced as a BDR, similar to like the BDR that you all just approved. That will be a BDR that's introduced on the Senate side and then brought forward to the Senate floor.
Thank you. You can get started whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kimber Ellsworth with the Fiscal Analysis Division, presenting the BDR for the 2023 Authorizations Act. And if you're okay with it, Chair, I'll go through the bill and then take any questions after the presentation.
That'd be perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So this bill reflects the decisions of the money committees. Section 1 of the Authorizations Act authorizes expenditure of sums not appropriated from the general fund or highway fund by agency for fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025. The Authorizations Act represents authority for agencies to collect and expend monies, including federal funds, gifts, grants, interagency transfers, service fees, and other funds. Additionally, due to specific statutory language for these agencies, the Act includes authority for the Gaming Control Board and the Gaming Commission to expend general fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium. Similarly, the bill includes authority for the Department of Transportation to expend highway fund over the 2023 to 25 biennium. The NDOT administration total includes all funding, the highway fund appropriation plus all authorizations, and the gaming accounts authorizations go in Section 1, and then their appropriations go in Sections 3 and 4 of the bill. I will note that there are 4 education accounts that are excluded from the Authorizations Act, as these are in the K-12 education funding bill. These are the Education Stabilization Account, the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan account, Teach Nevada Scholarship Program, and the account for State Special Education Services. Section 2 of your bill, of the bill, I apologize, begins on page 25. And this is carryover language from last biennium. Per the Master Settlement Agreement for Tobacco Settlement Funds, compliance and enforcement functions are required, and audit functions are also required. These disbursements are made before any other disbursements of the tobacco funds, and any balance not spent by these two agencies, by the AG's Office in Taxation, will revert with 40% to the Millennium Scholarship Trust Fund and 60% to the Healthy Nevada Fund. Any unspent Healthy Nevada Fund monies from the main Section 1 authorization revert to the Healthy Nevada Fund. Section 3 is also carryover language. This begins on page 26. This contains the general fund appropriations for the Gaming Control Board that I mentioned previously. Section 4 contains the general fund appropriations for the Gaming Commission that I mentioned previously, and this is on page 27. Section 5 is also on page 27, and this is also carryover language from last biennium. All authorizations included in sections 1 to 4 of this act, except for by the legislative department, judicial agencies, the Public Employees Retirement System, and the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, must be expended in accordance with the State Budget Act. This means that LCB, judicial, PERS, and TRPA don't have to go through the IFC for work program changes. Section 6 begins on page 28. This is also carryover language from last biennium. The chief of the budget division may augment or reduce any authorization through the work program process, except for LCB budgets or for Section 7 violations. The director of LCB may, with the approval of the Legislative Commission, augment the authorization for the legislative fund. And Section 7 begins on page 28. This includes carryover language from last biennium in the first paragraph, and it also has new language that was added. The general fund or highway fund appropriation must be decreased to the extent that other revenue sources exceed their authorizations, except for several sections that are called out in the first paragraph. Section 8, which is for NSHE, the use of their tuition and registration fees. Section 9, subpart 3, the public defender for additional contributions from counties. Sections 11 through 14 relate to the Division of Forestry for the use of funds for emergency response vehicle repair and for their incident business unit, and the special reserve to carry those funds forward. Section 15 relates to WICHE and their healthcare access program slots. Section 70 is for the Department or DCFS, Clark County and Washoe County Child Welfare. Section 18 relates to NSHE to carry forward funds. Section 26 is new, and we will cover that toward the end for the DCFS victims of crime. And Section 27 is also new for the Administrative Office of the Courts. The new parts to Section 7, there's a subsection 1B on page 29, and this adds that upon recommendation of the governor, the Interim Finance Committee may grant a request for an exemption from the requirements of this subsection for all or a portion of the excess money. And subsection 2 is also new language. This adds that the IFC shall consider, among other things, the reason provided for the exemption, including the current need for the excess money and the intent of the legislature in approving the budget for the current biennium. Section 8 is carryover language from last biennium relating to the Nevada system of higher education, allowing them to expend fees and tuition from the registration of resident or non-resident students in the designated amounts. Subsection 2, which is on page 30, allows NSHE to expend any additional registration fees and non-resident tuition fees beyond the budgeted enrollments. And requires NSHE to report to the IFC every 6 months about the additional fees and the expenditures associated with that. Subsection 3, also on page 30, requires any increases in non-general fund revenues not to reduce the general fund appropriation. So that's one of the Section 7 exemptions that I mentioned earlier. Section 9 is on page 31, and this is also carryover language from last biennium. This subsection 1 specifies that the allocation of county assessments for the services of the public defender, and it has the specific dollar amounts by fiscal year. Subsection 2 allows any salary, benefit, or COLA increases for employees of the Public Defender's Office be assessed and collected from the counties for their pro rata share. And subsection 3 allows the public defender to accept any additional contributions from the counties with IFC approval to augment their services. And this is also part of the Section 7 exemption that I mentioned previously. Section 10 begins on page 32. And this is also carryover language from last biennium. The tax on motor vehicle fuel used in watercraft for recreational purposes shall be allocated equally between wildlife and state parks. Wildlife regulates boating and fishing, and state parks has the water recreation opportunities in the state. Section 11 is carryover language from last biennium. This allows money authorized for the Division of Forestry, forestry conservation camps, and forest fire suppression budgets for the costs of repair and maintenance of firefighting and emergency response vehicles to be expended for that purpose. And again, this is one of the Section 7 exemptions. The Forest Fire Suppression Account receives and sends fire billings that cover the cost of personnel and equipment in response to fires. And the Forestry Administration and Conservation Camps budgets receive a portion of those billings to cover the cost of vehicle repairs. Section 12 is new language, and this adds a requirement that at least 50% of the coronavirus fiscal recovery funds balance forward from fiscal year 2023 and authorized for expenditure for fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 be advanced from the COVID-19 relief program's budget for expenditure to the respective state agency or organization for which the allocation has been approved. Section 13 is carryover language from last biennium. This allows money authorized for the Division of Forestry and the Forest Fire Suppression budgets to support of the incident business unit to be expended for that purpose. And Section 14 relates to that. This is also carryover language from last biennium. This authorizes the special reserves in the Forest Fire Suppression budget for the support of the incident business unit and up to $425,000 for the repair and maintenance of firefighting and emergency response vehicles. And again, this is included in the Section 7 paragraph. Section 15 is also carryover language from last biennium. The Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, or WICHE, the loan and stipend budget may balance forward to the subsequent fiscal year for expenditure on healthcare access program slots, any unobligated loan, stipend, or interest repayment revenues which were received after May 15th of each fiscal year. This budget's funded with loan repayments and general fund appropriations, and this was added for cash flow purposes. This is also included in the Section 7 exemptions. Section 16, I think I lost track of my page numbers. This is on page 34. This is, again, carryover language from last biennium. It authorizes the Office of the Military to carry forward the unexpended balance in the Emergency Operations Center account. The military charges each agency that uses the Emergency Operations Center and for the rent of the facility, and this balance can be carried forward with this section. Section 17, also beginning on page 34. This is also carryover language from last biennium. It authorizes the DHHS Division of Child and Family Services, Clark County and Washoe County to utilize any additional money received to augment child welfare services with the approval of the Interim Finance Committee. This is one of the sections that was mentioned in Section 7. Section 18 is also carryover language from last biennium. This authorizes the Nevada System of Higher Education to carry forward any unexpended money authorized for expenditure in Section 8, including registration fees and non-resident tuition, to the next fiscal year. This was also listed in Section 7. Section 19 is also carryover language. This waives the IFC approval requirement for any work program revision requests associated with the bond repayment costs of the bonds from the State Treasurer's Municipal Bond Bank revenue or Municipal Bond Bank debt services budgets. Section 20 on page 35 is also carryover language from last biennium. This requires the revenue from the sale of any retired vehicle that was purchased with state general funds be deposited in the state general fund. Section 21, also on page 35, is also carryover language. Requires the Public Employees Benefits Program to comply with the work program provisions of NRS 353 220 when projecting funding available in excess of projected expenditures, and requires the program to request approval of the IFC upon the recommendation of the governor to expend or otherwise obligate reserves. Section 22 is on page 36, and this is new language. This authorizes the use of interest earnings on amounts in the Consolidated Bond Interest and Redemption Fund to be transferred to the Nevada Statewide Infrastructure Bank budget account for personnel and operating expenditures. Section 23, also on page 36, is carryover language from last biennium. This requires Nevada Medicaid and the Nevada Checkup Program to utilize authorized funds to continue the current service delivery model for prescription drugs. Section 24 on page 37 is new language. This authorizes the Department of Transportation to utilize specified amounts from the State Highway Fund for the continuing costs of the replacement of the Nevada Shared Radio System. And in Section 29, you will see that this amount is authorized only if the associated one-shot bill is not approved for that shared radio system funding. Section 25 is also a new section. This requires any fee revenues balanced forward be expended before any new revenues and general fund appropriations may be expended for the Department of Public Safety Central Repository for Nevada Records of Criminal History. Section 26 is also new. This authorizes the Division of Child and Family Services to accept additional money to support the Victims of Crime budget account. And this is one of the new sections that was added to Section 7 exemptions. And Section 27 is also a new section at the bottom of page 37. This authorizes the Administrative Office of the Courts to utilize any money as a result of a settlement agreement related to ongoing litigation pertaining to the implementation of a statewide trial court case management system to use it for the implementation of a statewide trial court case management system. And this is the last section that was added to the Section 7 exemptions in that first paragraph in Section 7. Section 28 is carryover language from last biennium. This just adds that if the name or duties of an officer or agency have been changed or transferred pursuant to another act, then any reference to that officer or agency shall be deemed to refer to the officer or agency, the name or duties of which have been changed or transferred by the other act. Section 29 is on the last page, 38. And these are the effective dates of the bill. Sections 28 and 29 are effective upon passage and approval. Sections 1 to 27, except for 24, are effective on July 1st, 2023, and Section 24 is effective on July 1st, 2023, only if Assembly Bill 477, which is the one-shot funding for the NDOT shared radio system, is not passed and approved. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions on the authorization presentation? Okay, see none. Thank you. And we're going to take a quick 1-minute recess, like for real, 1 minute. Members, you just had a BDR delivered to you. Please check to see that you have BDR S 1208.
No?
207. Oh, it's the same one?
No.
No.
Okay. You all have, do you have one too?
Oh, they gave me 2 copies of the same one. They gave us the authorization.
Bringing the meeting back to order, and we will turn the beginning of this presentation over to our fiscal staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Adam Drost, and I'm with the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues, Madison Ryan and Liliana Camacho-Poco, and together we comprise the K-12 team for the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. This evening, we will walk through BDR S1208, which ensures sufficient funding for K-12 public education for the 2023-25 biennium. This will become what is known as the K-12 Education Funding Bill, which is one of the major budget bills. This bill reflects the closing decisions of the money committees related to the K-12 budgets, which are not included in the Appropriations Act or the Authorizations Act, and included only in the K-12 funding bill. Madam Chair, with your permission, we plan on covering the entire bill, and then we can respond to any questions at the end of our presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair. So starting with Section 1 on page 1, the total public support for school districts, charter schools, and university schools for profoundly gifted pupils, which is the Davidson Academy on the University of Nevada, Reno campus, for FY 2024, that is an estimated average of $12,863 per pupil. And on Section 2, on page 2, the total public support for school districts, charter schools, and university schools for profoundly gifted pupils for FY 2025 is an estimated average of $13,368 per pupil. I would note the total public support includes all money appropriated directly for the support of public schools in the state, including the statewide base per pupil funding amount, the adjusted base per pupil funding, the additional weighted funding, all money appropriated for a specific program or purpose in support of public schools, and all other money projected to be received for the support of public schools from taxes, fees, and other revenue authorized by state law. I would note it excludes any money provided by the federal government directly to a public school or school district or otherwise provided on a one-time basis in response to emergency. And that refers to the department's COVID-19 funding budget, which is one-time funding. I would note that we prepared a table and bar chart that hopefully all the members have before them. And this provides a comparison of the funding approved by the 2021 legislature for the current biennium, as well as the governor recommended funding for the upcoming biennium, and finally the funding approved by the money committees for the upcoming biennium. The table below also shows on a per pupil basis based on the average or the projected enrollment, with the blue line indicating the pupil-centered funding plan adjusted base funding, the gray line indicating the pupil-centered funding plan tier funding, which includes food service, transportation, and local special education funding. The yellow bar indicating the pupil-centered funding plan weights for English learner, at-risk, and gifted and talented pupils. The red bar indicating the state categorical programs, which includes state special education funding. And finally, the purple line indicating the federal funding that is distributed out to school districts and charter schools. And Madam Chair, that's Section 1 and Section 2. My colleague Liliana Camacho Polco will now cover the section, starting with Section 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drost. Liliana Camacho Polco for the record, Fiscal Analysis Division. I will begin on Section 3, which begins on page 2. And subsection 1 includes general fund appropriations for the pupil-centered funding plan account of $1.1 billion in fiscal year 2024 and $1.5 billion in fiscal year 2025. Subsection 2 is a legislative declaration that the amount appropriated is sufficient to fund the operation of K through 12 education. Subsection 3 and 4 are standard language requiring the general fund appropriations to be subject to the requirements of the State Budget Act, and also allows general fund appropriations to be transferred between fiscal years with approval of the governor upon the recommendation of the director of the governor's finance office, but without IFC approval. Subsection 4, beginning at the bottom of page 3, indicates authorization, or subsection 1 indicates the authorizations of $4.4 billion in fiscal year 2024, and subsection 2 includes authorizations of $4.3 billion in fiscal year 2025. These amounts reflect the funding provided by non-general fund sources, including property tax, local school support tax, governmental services tax, and room tax revenue. Subsection 3 is standard language requiring the authorizations to be subject to the requirements of the State Budget Act. And the total amount of funding provided in Section 3 of General Fund Appropriations and Section 4 of Authorizations is $5.5 billion in fiscal year 2024 and $5.7 billion in fiscal year 2025. And Section 5 begins on page 4. And this begins the funding of the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan in fiscal year 2024 based on the funding tiers established in Chapters 387 of NRS. Subsection 1 provides the transfers of funding for food services, a total of $1.6 million, and transportation costs of $193.2 million for each school district. Subsection 2, beginning on page 5, provides the transfers of local funding for special education costs for each school district and all charter schools, totaling $483.8 million in fiscal year 2024. Subsection 3 begins on page 6 and provides a statewide base per pupil funding amount of $8,966 in fiscal year 2024. Subsection 4 begins on page 6 and goes through page 7 and provides the adjusted base per pupil funding amount in fiscal year 2024 for each school district. Amounts include the statewide base per pupil funding, as well as Nevada Cost of Education Index and attendance area adjustments for each school district on the pupil-centered funding plan, or the calculated per pupil amount for those school districts receiving the fiscal year 2020 baseline amount. Subsection 5 begins on page 7 and provides the statewide base per pupil funding amount of $8,966 that would be provided to pupils enrolled full-time in a program of distance education in fiscal year 2024 for each charter school or university school for profoundly gifted pupils, as virtual schools only receive the statewide base per pupil funding amount per NRS 387.1214. Subsection 5 also provides the individual adjusted base per pupil amounts that would be provided to charter schools operating in each county, excluding the attendance area adjustments. The statewide base per pupil amount times the Nevada Cost of Education Index for each county. The money committees approved using a Nevada Cost of Education Index of 1.0 for all counties, so the statewide base per pupil amount is reflected for each county. Subsection 6, beginning on page 8 and going through page 9, provides the final adjusted base per pupil funding that would be provided for each charter school currently operating in the 6 counties that have charter schools, inclusive of the attendance area adjustments for those charter schools. As illustrated, these amounts vary based on the adjusted base amount, as well as the attendance area adjustments calculated for each area. Subsection 7, beginning on page 9, provides the calculated weights for English learners of 0.45, at-risk pupils of 0.35, and gifted and talented pupils of 0.12. Subsection 8, beginning on the page 9 and going through page 10, provides the weighted funding that would be provided to individual school districts, charter schools combined, and the university schools for profoundly gifted pupils in fiscal year 2024. For English learners, the total is $212.5 million, at-risk funding total of $198.7 million, and gifted and talented funding of a total of $8 million. Subsection 9, beginning at the top of page 11, details the school districts that would receive fiscal year 2020 baseline amounts under the pupil-centered funding plan in fiscal year 2024, which are Esmeralda, Eureka, and Story County school districts. The subsection further clarifies that these school districts may reapportion base and weight funding to provide a reasonably equal education opportunity for its pupils. Section 6, beginning at the bottom of page 11, is similar to Section 5 and begins funding the pupil-centered funding plan in fiscal year 2025 based on the funding tiers established in Chapter 387 of NRS. Subsection 1 provides the transfer of funding for food services for a total of $1.6 million and transportation costs for a total of $193.2 million for each school district. Subsection 2 on page 12 provides the transfers of local funding for special education costs for each school district and all charter schools, totaling $483.9 million in fiscal year 2025. Subsection 3, starting at the bottom of page 13, provides the statewide base per pupil funding of $9,414 in fiscal year 2025. Subsection 4 provides the adjusted base per pupil funding amount in fiscal year 2025 for each school district. Amounts include the base per pupil funding, as well as Nevada Cost of Education Index and attendance area adjustments for each school district on the pupil-centered funding plan, or the calculated per pupil amount for those school districts receiving the fiscal year 2020 baseline amount. Subsection 5 begins at the bottom of page 14 and provides a statewide base per pupil funding amount of $9,414 that would be provided to pupils enrolled full-time in a program of distance education in fiscal year 2025 for each charter school or university school for profoundly gifted pupils, as virtual charter schools only receive the statewide base per pupil funding amount per NRS 387.1214. Subsection 5 also provides the individual adjusted base per pupil amounts that would be provided to charter schools operating in each county, excluding the attendance area adjustments. The base per pupil amount times the Nevada Cost of Education Index for each county. The money committee is approved using a Nevada Cost of Education Index of 1.0 for all counties, so the statewide base per pupil amount is reflected for each county. Subsection 6, beginning at the bottom of page 15, provides the final adjusted base per pupil funding that would be provided for each charter school currently operating in the 6 counties that have charter schools, inclusive of the attendance area adjustments for those charter schools. As illustrated, these amounts vary based on the adjusted base amount as well as the attendance area adjustments calculated for each area. Subsection 7, beginning on page 16, provides the calculated weights for English learners of 0.45, at-risk pupils of 0.35, and gifted and talented pupils of 0.12. Subsection 8 provides the weighted funding that would be provided in fiscal year 2025 to individual school districts, charter schools combined, and the university schools for profoundly gifted pupils. The total for English learners is $223.2 million, total for at-risk funding of $208.6 million, and total of gifted and talented funding of $8.4 million. Subsection 9 details the school districts that would receive fiscal year 2020 baseline amounts under the pupil-centered funding plan in fiscal year 2025, and those school districts are Esmeralda, Eureka, and Story counties. This subsection further clarifies that these school districts may reapportion base and weight funding to provide a reasonably equal educational opportunity for its pupils. Thank you. That concludes my sections, and Ms. Ryan will present the remainder of the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Camacho Poco. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Madison Ryan, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. For the record, I will be walking through the remaining sections of the BDR, which includes Section 7 through Section 17. So Section 7 begins on page 18 of the BDR. Subsection 1 provides general fund appropriations of $245.7 million in fiscal year 2024 and $252.8 million in fiscal year 2025 for the account for state special education services. Subsection 2 provides authorizations of $2 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium in the account for state special education services, and this is balance forward funding utilized to fund extraordinary special education expenditures. Moving to page 19 of the BDR, subsections 3 and 4 provides the transfer of $244.2 million in fiscal year 2024 and $251.3 million in fiscal year 2025 for state special education funding provided to school districts, charter schools, and university schools for profoundly gifted pupils, largely based on their special education enrollment as a multiplier. As a reminder, state special education funding is limited to no more than 13% of total enrollment for each school district and charter school. Subsections 5 and 6 provides the transfer of $1.5 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 for state special education funding provided to school districts and charter schools with special education enrollment that exceeds the 13% funding cap. Subsections 7 and 8, which are outlined at the bottom of page 19 and the top of page 20 of the BDR, provides the transfer of $2 million that is utilized to fund extraordinary special education expenditures that are not ordinarily present in the typical special education service and delivery system at a public school. Subsection 9 requires the remaining general fund appropriations to revert at the end of each fiscal year. Section 8 begins on page 20 of the BDR. Subsection 1 provides general fund appropriations of $44.3 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 for the other state education programs account. Subsection 2 is standard language requiring the general fund appropriations to be subject to the requirements of the State Budget Act. Subsection 3 provides the transfer of $19.3 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 from the other state education programs account for the adult high school diploma program. Moving to page 21 of the BDR, subsection 4 includes an annual reporting requirement for the adult high school diploma program. Subsection 5 requires any remaining funding from fiscal year 2024 for the adult high school diploma program to be balanced forward and added to the fiscal year 2025 funding. It also requires any remaining funding at the end of fiscal year 2025 to revert to the general fund. Subsection 6 provides that money appropriated as outlined in this section is available for both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 and may be transferred from year to year with interim finance committee approval. Paragraph A of subsection 6 begins at the top of page 22 and provides the transfer of $3.9 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 from the other state education programs account for the Jobs for Nevada's Graduates program. Paragraph B provides the transfer of $300,000 in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 from the other state education programs account to the Department of Education for transfer to the Leadership Institute of Nevada for the implementation and operation of education leadership training programs. Expenditure of these amounts is contingent upon a one-to-one match from sources other than the state appropriation. Subsection 7 of the total transferred in each fiscal year for the Jobs for Nevada's Graduates, $314,293 is contingent upon a one-to-one match from non-general fund sources. Subsection 8 includes an annual reporting requirement to the Interim Finance Committee for the Education Leadership Training Program. Moving to page 23 of the BDR, subsection 9 requires the remaining general fund appropriations for the Jobs for Nevada's Graduates program and the Leadership Institute of Nevada to revert to the general fund at the end of fiscal year 2025. Subsections 10 and 11 provides the transfer of $13.5 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 from the other state education programs account for the award of grants for the career and technical education program. Any unused funding must revert to the general fund at the end of each fiscal year. And moving to page 24 of the document, subsections 12 and 13, provides the transfer of $462,725 in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 from the other state education programs account for the award of grants to support public broadcasting in the state. Any unused funding must revert to the general fund at the end of each fiscal year. In subsections 14 and 15, provides that $6.8 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 from the other state education programs account be used by the Department of Education for the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching grant program. And any unused funding must revert to the general fund at the end of fiscal year 2025. Section 9 is on page 25 of the document. In subsection 1, provides general fund appropriations of $7.7 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 for the professional development programs account. Subsection 2 is standard language requiring the general fund appropriations to be subject to the requirements of the State Budget Act. Section 10 begins on page 25 of the document as well, and subsections 1 and 2 provides the transfer of $7.6 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 from the Professional Development Programs account to the Department of Education for transfer to the school districts that serve as the fiscal agents. As identified in this subsection, the following transfers would occur in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025. To the Clark County School District, $4 million, to the Elko County School District, $1.3 million, and to the Washoe County School District, $2.3 million. Moving to page 26, subsection 3 requires any remaining funding from fiscal year 2024 for the professional development programs to be balanced forward and added to the fiscal year 2025 funding. This also requires any remaining funding at the end of fiscal year 2025 to revert to the general fund. And section 11 begins on page 26. In subsections 1 and 2 provides the transfer of $100,000 in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 from the Professional Development Programs account to the Department of Education for transfer to the Statewide Council for the coordination of the regional training programs to provide additional training opportunities for education administrators in Nevada. Subsection 3 requires any remaining funding from fiscal year 2024 for the council to be balanced forward and added to the fiscal year 2025 funding, and also requires any remaining funding at the end of fiscal year 2025 to revert to the general fund. Section 12 begins on page 27, and subsection 1 provides general fund appropriations of $560,886 in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 for the 1/5 Retirement Credit Purchase Program account. Subsection 2 allows the funding to be transferred between fiscal years with interim finance committee approval. In section 13 begins on page 28. In subsection 1 provides general fund appropriations of $2.4 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 for the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program account. Subsection 2 is standard language requiring the general fund appropriations to be subject to the requirements of the State Budget Act. And subsections 3 and 4 provides authorizations of $3.8 million in fiscal year 2024 and $4 million in fiscal year 2025, largely balance forward funding in the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program account. Section 14 is on page 29, and subsection 1 provides general fund appropriations of $3.2 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 to the Interim Finance Committee for the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program. Subsection 2 allows the Interim Finance Committee to allocate funding to the Department of Education from the funding identified in subsection 1 of section 14 from the contingency account of the Interim Finance Committee to increase funding for the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program upon presentation of a status report on the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program by the Department of Education. And subsection 3 requires the remaining general fund appropriations to revert at the end of each fiscal year. Section 15 begins on page 29 as well, and subsection 1 provides authorizations of $851.7 million in fiscal year 2024 in the Education Stabilization Account. Moving to page 30, subsection 2 provides authorizations of $878.9 million in fiscal year 2025 in the Education Stabilization Account. Subsection 3, again, is standard language requiring the general fund appropriations to be subject to the, wrong thing. And then section 16 is on page 30 of the document, and it amends NRS 387-1211 to define at-risk pupil as a pupil who is within the quintile of pupils determined to be most in need of additional services and assistance to graduate based on one or more measures prescribed by the state board, which may include, without limitation, consideration of whether a pupil is economically disadvantaged, is at risk of dropping out of high school, or fails to meet minimum standards of academic proficiency. And finally, section 17 is this act becomes effective on July 1st, 2023. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, the three of you, for this overview of the K-12 budget bill. Again, this bill is a Senate bill, so we won't be taking a vote to pass this BDR, but did anyone have questions for the presenters? Seeing none, did you? Okay. So seeing none, I will thank the three of you, and I know you have to run downstairs now. So I appreciate your time. Thank you. Members.
You can go ahead. That's something you will be voting.
The next three are BDR introductions that we will be taking a vote on. And our first one is BDR S1210, which makes various changes regarding state financial administration and makes appropriations for the support of the civil government of the state.
Madam Chair, I would so move.
Members, do you have copies on your desk of S1210? Well, let's get you guys some copies, and we will take just a 1-minute recess to get all the members' copies. Okay, members, do you all have a copy of BDR S-1210? All right, then we can go ahead and get started. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair. John Cusero, LCB Fiscal for the record. I'm joined by Morgan Barlow, Tiffany Greenemeyer, and Stephanie Day-Bahaivi, who are all instrumental in the drafting of the 2023 Appropriations Act. Would also like to thank our colleagues in LCB Legal for all of their assistance in drafting this act. The 2023 Appropriations Act implements budget decisions made by the money committees for state general fund and highway funded budgets, as well as back language to implement money committee decisions related to appropriated funding. Sections 1 through 33 include general fund appropriations for the operation of state government totaling $3.454 billion in fiscal year 24 and $3.588 billion in fiscal year 25, or $7.042 billion over the 23 to 25 biennium. It's an increase of approximately $1.026 billion when compared to general fund appropriations approved by the 2021 legislature for the 21 to 23 biennium. This includes pages 1 through, I believe, 19 through 17 of your packet. Section 34 includes highway fund appropriations totaling $167.5 million in fiscal year 24 and $168.6 million in fiscal year 25, or $336.1 million over the 23 to 25 biennium, an increase of approximately $30.8 million from the previous biennium. Budgets excluded from the Appropriations Act include 6 K-12 budgets included in the Education Bill, general fund authorizations for the Gaming Control Board and Gaming Commission, and highway fund authorizations for the Department of Transportation in the Authorization Act, and both highway and general fund salary adjustment funds appropriated to the Board of Examiners in the pay bill. Fiscal staff also note general fund appropriations in the back language of this act totaling $14.9 million in fiscal year 23, $13.5 million in fiscal year 24, and $6.9 million contingent upon the outcome of related legislation. Moving to page 19 of your packet. Section 35 includes continuing language noting appropriations must be expended in accordance with NRS 353, sections 150 through sections 246 inclusive, which is also known as the State Budget Act. Section 35 notes funds are appropriated to separate fiscal years and transfers between categories will be made in accordance with the State Budget Act with the approval of the Interim Finance Committee upon recommendation of the governor. This section excludes entities that are exempt from the State Budget Act, including the Legislative Fund, the Supreme Court, and the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Sections 36 through sections 45, beginning on page 20 of the BDR, allow for the availability of general fund appropriations between fiscal years, beginning with section 36 on page 20 of the bill, which enumerates 24 budgets that are allowed to transfer appropriations between fiscal years. Based on subcommittee action and on page 21 of the BDR, the victims of crime and public option budgets were added to this section, with the first 22 budgets being carryover. Section 37, also on page 21 of the BDR, is also carryover language that allows for the transfer of appropriations related to deferred maintenance or extraordinary maintenance between fiscal years of the 23 to 25 biennium within the same budget. Section 38, also carryover language, allows $25,000 appropriated to the governor's finance special appropriations budget is intended to support Civil Air Patrol over the 23 to 25 biennium. Section 39, also carryover language and continuing on to page 22 of the BDR, allows for $1 million in general fund appropriations each year of the 23-25 biennium to be available for expenditure in either year of the biennium related to broadband improvement for schools in the Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology in the Office of the Governor. Section 40, moving on, still on page 22, is carryover language, which allows $8.5 million in general funds appropriated to the Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology to support graduate medical education. And this section notes it's available in both fiscal years of the biennium. Fiscal staff also notes previously that this section was appropriated to the special appropriation budget within the Governor's Office of Finance and is now directly appropriated to the Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology. Section 41 is new language, which allows for $3.1 million in each year of the 23-25 biennium to support Secretary of State credit card processing fees, and notes this is available in either year of the biennium. Section 42, moving to page 23 of the BDR, includes revised language relating to the Supreme Court and allows for the transfer of operating funds between fiscal years for certain Supreme Court budgets. It notes supplemental or contingency account requests shall not be made from the judicial department branch salaries budget. $650,000 appropriated in each fiscal year is available in either year to support the implementation of a new statewide digital evidence management system as approved by the legislature. Remaining portions of $1.4 million in fiscal year 2024 to build a hybrid training facility at the Supreme Court Law Library in the Carson City Supreme Court building must be transferred to the Supreme Court budget, and unused portions of the appropriation made in fiscal year 24 to support multi-county integrated justice information system projects must be transferred to the Administrative Office of the Courts. Section 43, moving on to page 25, is existing language, which allows for $179,680 in general fund appropriations in the 25 biennium to be available in either year for support of the Conservation and Natural Resources Administration contract services to update the Conservation Credit System Manual and Nevada Scientific Methods document, as well as the Habitat Quantification Tool. Section 44 on page 26 of the BDR is new language, which allows for $840,284 in fiscal year 24 and $63,000 in fiscal year 25 for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Division of State Lands budget to replace the division's land management system, and for this funding to be available in either year of the biennium. Section 45, continuing on the same page, is carry forward language, which allows for $2 million in each year of the 23-25 biennium to be available for either year of the biennium to support DMV credit card processing fees. Sections 46 through 49, beginning on page 26 and continuing, include exceptions to standard reversion requirements. Section 46 is carryover language, which requires any remaining balance of the initial $1 million appropriation made in fiscal year in 2015 to support sagebrush improvement projects, and it notes that this does not revert to the general fund. Section 47, beginning on page 26 and continuing on to page 27, is carryover language noting appropriations in the knowledge account and the Main Street account within the Governor's Office of Economic Development must be carried forward and does not revert to the general fund. Section 48, still on page 27 of the bill, is carry forward language requiring appropriations for the Nevada System of Higher Education Trust Fund for the education of dependent children does not revert to the general fund. Section 49 is continuing language for the Nevada System of Higher Education Special Projects budget account, which allows for funding to be carried forward for up to 2 fiscal years dedicated to research projects before it must be reverted to the general fund. Sections 50 through 62, really the big lift, allow for the transfer of appropriated funds between or among budget accounts. Section 50, still on page 27, is continuing language allowing for the transfer of appropriations related to salaries between budgets within the same department or division. Section 51, moving on to page 28, is carry forward language stipulating the amounts appropriated to the legislative fund are available for either fiscal year and may be transferred among the legislative budgets. Section 52, still on page 28 of the BDR, is continuing language which allows the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services to transfer appropriation among its budgets. Section 53 is continuing language which allows, Section 53 is continuing language allowing transfers between the Medicaid and checkup budgets within the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy. Section 54, moving on to page 29 of your BDR, continuing language allows for the transfer of general fund appropriations among the 3 Division of Child and Family Services budgets within the Department of Health and Human Services. These are the 3 juvenile justice budget accounts. Section 55, still on page 29 of the BDR, is continuing language which allows for the transfers between the 2 Division of Child and Family Services mental health budgets. This is Northern and Southern Child and Adolescent Services. Section 56 is new language allowing transfers among the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. These are their 3 behavioral health budgets, which includes Northern and Southern Adult Mental Health Services, as well as Lakes Crossing Center. Section 57, starting on page 29 and moving to page 30, includes carry forward language relating to the upper payment limit budget account, which allows for transfer of savings realized in the Department of Health and Human Services budgets to fund the state share of the Private Hospital Collaborative Supplemental Payment Program and to fund reversions to both the general fund and the Fund for a Healthy Nevada. Section 58, beginning on page 30 of the BDR, is continuing language allowing transfers among the regional center budgets within the Aging and Disability Services Division Health and Human Services budgets. Moving along to section 59 at the top of page 31 is continuing language which allows for the transfer from either the Medicaid or the checkup budgets to the Medicaid administration budget within the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy to support related administrative activities. Section 60 is continuing language which allows for the transfer of funds among Nevada system of higher education budgets. Section 61 is continuing language allows for the transfer of Nevada System of Higher Education performance funding between the appropriate budgets and allows for funding to be balanced forward for one fiscal year to meet performance measures. If the performance measures have not been met in that subsequent fiscal year, funds may be used to support need-based scholarship programs. And the final section in this grouping includes section 62 on page 32. And this is continuing language which allows for the transfer of funds among Department of Corrections budgets. Moving on to sections 63 through 70, which include restrictions or qualifications related to appropriated funding reflecting the will of the money committees. Section 63, still at the bottom of page 32 of the BDR, is new language related to appropriated funding for the Public Employees Benefits Program and requires funds to be expended to support additional health savings account or health reimbursement arrangement contributions of between $300 and $500 depending on the participant status. Section 64, moving to page 33 of the BDR, is also carryover language which expresses the intent of the legislature to continue the current service delivery model related to prescription drugs for the Medicaid and checkup programs over the 23 to 25 biennium. Section 65 is carryover language which specifies that appropriations made to certain healthcare financing and policy and welfare and supportive services budgets are limits and that supplemental appropriations shall not be requested except under certain circumstances, including changes to federal reimbursement or program structure. Section 66 on page 34 of the BDR is carryover language which specifies that the appropriations made to Washoe County and Clark County child welfare budgets accepting support for the adoption subsidy program are limits and these budgets shall not request supplemental appropriations. Sections 67 and 68 reflect language as approved by the money committees, which establishes a minimum wage for direct care workers of personal care services agencies equaling not less than $16 per hour of the $25 per hour increased rate received for Medicaid providers as well as Aging and Disability Service Division providers. This language is effective January 1, 2024, when the rate increases are effective for the Aging and Disability Services Division, and effective upon notification of the Director of the Legislative Counsel Bureau by the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services that Medicaid rate increases received federal approval, but not earlier than January 1, 2024. Section 69, also as approved by the money committees, specifies that the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services shall reimburse providers of applied behavior analysis or ABA services that align with the approved Medicaid and checkup budgets, notwithstanding statutory provisions that require rates to align with the median rates of comparable states. As discussed and approved by the committees, this language allows the department to pay rates that are greater than the comparable rates. Section 70, still on page 35 of the bill, is carryover language that requires the Nevada System of Higher Education to comply with any gubernatorial request to set aside funds. Sections 71 and 72 relate to allowable general fund advances and begin on page 35 and continue on to page 36 of the bill. Section 71 allows for a general fund advance to the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources in the event of delayed receipts related to forest fire suppression. Section 72 is carryover language that allows for an increased $50,000 when compared to the prior Appropriations Act general fund advance to the Office of Military in the event the Nevada National Guard is ordered into active duty. Sections 73 through 78, beginning on page 38 of the BDR, relate to restricted interim finance committee contingency allocations. Section 73 includes $50,000 in fiscal year 24 for additional contractual support for allocation to the Department of Agriculture. Section 74 includes $2.4 million in fiscal year 25 for allocation to the Aging and Disability Services Division of the Department of Health and Human Services, community-based care staffing, and associated expenditures. Section 75 also includes $2.4 million in fiscal year 25 in general fund appropriations for allocations to the Aging and Disability Services Division Adult Protective Services program for staffing and associated expenditures. Section 76 on page 40 of the BDR includes $1.5 million in general fund appropriations in fiscal year 25 for allocation, again, to the Aging and Disability Services Division Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program for staffing and associated expenditures. Section 77 includes $638,472 in fiscal year 24 and $586,956 in general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2025 to support staffing and associated expenditures at the Desert Willow Treatment Center for allocation to the Division of Child and Family Services, again within the Department of Health and Human Services. And finally, in this grouping includes Section 78 at the bottom of page 41 is $1.7 million in fiscal year 2025 related to the Tonopah Conservation Camp for allocation to the Department of Corrections. Moving through, getting to the last couple subsection groupings here, includes sections 79 through 85, beginning on page 42, which relate to general fund appropriations or extensions of general fund appropriations made in the prior biennium. Section 79 is carryover section including an appropriation of $181,158 general fund dollars over the 23 to 25 biennium to support the legislators' retirement system. Section 80 is also standard language that includes $14.9 million in general fund appropriations to support the cost of the 82nd legislative session. Section 81, still on page 42 of the BDR, is new language that provides for a $2 million general fund appropriation in each year of the 23-25 biennium to provide active and retired state employees with life insurance. Section 82 is new and contingent language upon enabling legislation providing a $6.9 million general fund appropriation to support the continued replacement of the shared radio system. Section 83, and moving on to page 84, extends the reversion date of a $2.2 million appropriation made to the Department of Corrections to support the offender management system as approved in Section 1 of AB 462, Assembly Bill 462, in the prior legislative session. This date is extended to June of 2025. Section 84 similarly extends the reversion date of a $1.4 million appropriation made to the Department of Corrections to support the reintegration of the offender sentence management system into the Nevada Offender Tracking Information System as approved in Section 2 of Assembly Bill 462 of the prior session. This also includes an extension to June of 2025. Section 85 similarly extends the reversion date of a $1.1 million general fund appropriation made to the Office of Federal Assistance in the Office of the Governor for personnel and operating costs and the cost of upgrades to the grant management system, which was approved in Section 29.63 of Assembly Bill 445. And finally, but certainly not least, our grouping of sections from 86 to 93 are generally included in the Appropriations Act. Section 86 stipulates that aside from noted exceptions, Section 86 specifies a standard reversion date for unspent general fund appropriations. Section 87, moving to page 46 of the BDR, requires the controller to process claims and specifies the last day to process claims in each fiscal year. Section 88 directs the controller to establish funding as directed in this act. Section 89 at the bottom of page 46 directs the controller to pay salaries for certain elected officials in biweekly installments. Section 90 on page 47 specifies permissible actions if the general fund balance is reduced below $150 million during the interim. Section 91 on page 48 is carryover language relating to payments made to the federal government under the Federal Cash Management Improvement Act of 1990. Section 92, almost there, includes accounts for changes in names of state officers or agencies. And finally, Section 93 addresses effective dates for all the prior sections of the bill. Madam Chair, after all of that, happy to address any questions or concerns.
Thank you so much for that very long presentation. Now you can take a breath. Members, questions? We have Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I forget the exact pages again, but there's several allocations of funds for Smart 21. I thought we closed that out and went going to another program. Could you explain that to me, please?
Assemblyman John Kucera for the record. Perhaps the name change might be something that comes in ensuing biennia, but the amounts appropriated to the Smart 21 budget include all of the individual appropriations and in other acts authorizations made and approved by the money committee. So this would be the same allocations that this committee previously saw and approved for the Smart 21 budget, including all of the adjustments and enhancements as approved in this session.
So the name isn't, I apologize for, maybe I'm just confused. It's late, and it's only Monday. So it isn't the original Smart 21 program, it's whatever the new, I think they call it NV something or other. What is, Core NV, that's where the money is actually going for that program. Is that correct then?
Get separately with John Kucera, LCB Fiscal for the record. Yes, that's my understanding that the name may be a legacy component.
You're laughing at me. Can't get rid of it. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any other questions? All right, seeing none, then I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, so move.
Second.
I have a motion from Assemblywoman Backus, a second from Assemblywoman Hadigi. Any discussion on the motion? Assemblywoman Kasama.
I just want to, are we approving the introduction of the BDR or just the BDR? Okay, good. I want to make sure.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Okay, members, moving on to our next BDR introduction. It's BDRS 1211. Do you have copies of it? They're being handed out right now. It authorizes and provides funding for certain projects of capital improvement. And as soon as we have every member get a copy, we'll get started. Members, you all have a copy of BDR S-1211? Yes? Okay, then we can get started.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Julie Waller with the Fiscal Analysis Division. It's our pleasure to present the BDR for the Capital Improvement Program for the 2023-25 biennium. And with me, I have Nicolette Johnston and Colby Nichols to my left, and would like to also recognize Brody Leiser for the contributions they've assisted in preparing this BDR. And with that, we will go ahead and walk through BDR S1211, which implements the 2023 CIP. I would note the Money Committees closed the 23 Capital Improvement Program on May 10th, 2023. And I'll provide a summary of the legislation by section. I would note at the top right corner of your BDR, this bill will require a 2/3 vote, and that is for the reauthorization of the property tax in Section 19. That services the debt for the Capital Improvement Program. Also, I would note that a number of projects have multiple funding sources, and as such, they will be listed in multiple sections of the bill. Projects are grouped by agency under each different funding source. So to begin with, Section 1 on page 1, this section appropriates $422.2 million of general fund appropriations to support 66 projects in the 2023 CIP for various agencies identified under this section. On page 2 of note, in the middle of, or at the top of page 2, Project 23C36, there's $74.5 million for improvements for buildings to be purchased in Las Vegas. Also would note Project 23C37 is a building purchase and improvements here in Carson City for $22.3 million. Moving on to the bottom of page 3, there's another notable project, 23M04, and that's for the Southern Desert Correctional Center, $21.4 million for replacement of doors, locks, and security systems there. Moving forward to page 5, middle of page 5 there is for the Department of Health and Human Services, again, another significant project, 23M02, $37.8 million for deferred maintenance projects for Health and Human Services. Moving forward to page 6, the top of page 6, you'll see 3 projects for the Nevada System of Higher Education. 2 of them are for deferred maintenance. Projects M23M01 and 23M51, those total $62 million. There's additional 23M37 is a $5.4 million project for the Desert Research Institute. Project 23P01 in the middle of page 6 is for the Advanced Planning Headquarters Building in Carson City, and that's $11.8 million of general fund appropriations. Moving forward to page 7, the bottom of page 7, the Advanced Planning for the North Las Vegas State Veterans Home, Project 23P04 is $15.5 million of general fund appropriations. Section 2 limits the authority for expenditure through June 30th, 2027, and establishes a reversion of any remaining funds for the projects identified in Section 1. CIP projects typically have a 4-year period for which the funds may be expended, and therefore this section provides for that time period. Similar language can be found in sections 4, 7, and 9 to address the reversion of various sources of fund to support the 2023 CIP. Turning to page 8, Section 3 appropriates $11.5 million of state highway funds to support 4 DMV projects, 1 public safety project, and 1 statewide paving project in the 2023 CIP identified under this section. Section 5, in the middle of page 9, restricts the transfer of funds from highway fund projects for projects identified in Section 3 until contract payments are required. The bottom of page 9, Section 6 authorizes $533.7 million in general obligation bonds for projects which are identified in this section. This section also reallocates $5 million of bonds previously issued under prior CIP legislation from 2019 for projects under this section. This will allow for bond proceeds already issued to be spent before the proceeds of any new bonds issued pursuant to this section. Turning now to on page 11, I would note some significant projects here. Project 23C30, that's at the top of page 11, and that's the to construct the administration building on the Kincaid building site, Project 23C30. That's $158.5 million. And then right below it, the purchase of buildings for state offices in Las Vegas, Project 23C35, and that's a total of $213.9 million. Moving ahead to page 12, the top of page 12, I would point out the Southern Nevada Small Arms Range for the Nevada Army National Guard. That's Project 23C33, and that's $17 million. For the Department of Veterans Services, Project 23C06, that's the remodel and addition of the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home, and that project cost for bond proceeds is $35.8 million. This project is also funded with federal funds further on in the BDR. Section 7 again is the reversionary language related to the bond proceeds. Section 8 at the bottom of page 12 authorizes $111.3 million in general obligation bonds for 5 Department of Motor Vehicle projects, including CIP Project 23C02, which can be found in the middle of page 13. And this is for the DMV, a new DMV Silverado Ranch facility in Las Vegas. The section also establishes that the required annual debt service payment for these projects are from the Highway Fund. Moving now to page 15, we have Section 10. Section 10 specifies that the State Board of Finance will issue general obligation bonds for the 2023 CIP when it deems appropriate. Subsection 2 allows the state controller to advance general fund money if bonds have not yet been sold to finance the projects approved in the 2023 CIP. Subsection 3 allows the state controller to advance highway fund monies if bonds have not yet been sold to finance the projects approved to be funded with highway funds. Moving forward to page 16. Section 11 authorizes $102.4 million from funding sources other than the general fund or the state highway fund for projects identified in this section. This includes authority for federal funds, agency funds, as well as proceeds from bonds issued under the Conservation Bond Program for the support of 2 CIP projects. There are 7 projects that are funded with federal funds, totaling $69.9 million. 4 projects funded with agency funds for a total of $5.5 million. And again, the 2 projects funded with the proceeds from the Conservation Bond Program for a total of $27 million. Turning to page 18, subsection 2 requires the State Public Works Division to not execute a contract for construction of a project approved in the CIP. That includes authorized non-state receipts until the division has determined that the non-state funding authorized has been awarded and/or is available for expenditure. Section 12 on page 18 requires that if the Department of Veterans Services receives a grant from the U.S. Department of Veterans Services for CIP Project 23P04, that's the advanced planning of the North Las Vegas State Veterans Home, the department shall immediately deposit that money received in the state general fund. Section 13, at the bottom of page 18, requires that the State Public Works Division use only qualified personnel to execute the 2023 CIP. Moving to the top of page 19, Section 14 requires state and local government entities cooperate with the State Public Works Division in carrying out the provisions of the CIP. Section 15 approves $3 million in bonds for the Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation Grant Program. Subsection 2 of Section 15 clarifies the term proceeds means the amounts received from the sale of bonds as well as any accrued interest. Section 16 approves $13 million in bonds for the Lake Tahoe Basin Environmental Improvement Program with authorized uses of the proceeds provided in Assembly Bill 484 of this session. Section 17 approves $43.3 million in bonds for conservation programs authorized under AB 84 of the 2019 session, inclusive of the $27 million to support 2 CIP projects for the Division of Museums. Turning to page 20, Section 18 provides additional explanation that is intended that the bonds issued under Sections 16 and 17 are exempt from the constitutional debt limit. Section 19 approves ad valorem taxes for general obligation debt service and the Question 1 or Q1 bond program. The conservation bond program established through AB 84 of the 2019 session. For the state's general obligation debt, 16.18 cents on every $100 assessed valuation will be used to support existing general obligation debt for the state, for prior bond issuances, and for the bonds that are sold for the 2023 CIP. For the Q1 program and the conservation program, established through AB 84 of the 2019 session, 0.82 cents for every $100 of assessed valuation will be used to support the bonds that were sold for the Q1 program and that will be sold for the conservation bond program established through AB 84 of the 2019 session. The overall rate of 17 cents per $100 of assessed valuation remains the same as approved for the current biennium. Turning to page 22, Section 20 requires that the state treasurer will estimate sufficient funding and determine whether that amount exists in the Consolidated Bond Interest and Redemption Fund to pay the principal and interest on past CIP bond issuances as well as current issuances. If there is not enough money in the Consolidated Bond Interest and Redemption account, the treasurer can request the state controller to reserve money in the general fund to pay those debts. Okay, so we are, what page are we? Thank you. Section 23 indicates that with the approval of the Interim Finance Committee, the State Public Works Division of the Department of Administration and the Nevada System of Higher Education may transfer appropriated, allocated, and authorized money from one project to another within the same agency or within the Nevada System of Higher Education, respectively, for those projects listed in the so-named sections of this Act. Section 24, on page 24, the money collected pursuant to the annual tax on slot machines is authorized in the amount of $3 million for Project 23M01, Deferred Maintenance for the Nevada System of Higher Education. Subsection 2 requires that any remaining balance of this funding must not be committed for expenditure after June 30th of 2027. Oh, thank you. Oh, okay. Thank you. My apologies, Madam Chair. It appears that I skipped over Section 22 and Section 21 and Section 22. Just briefly mention that Section 21, the State Board of Finance in its capacity as the State General Obligation Bond Commission shall pay the expenses related to the issuance of general obligation bonds approved by the 82nd session of the Nevada Legislature from the proceeds of those bonds. And Section 22, expenditure of the following sums not appropriated from the State General Fund or the Highway Fund is authorized in this section. from the Consolidated Bond Interest and Redemption Fund in the amount of $174.5 million in each year of the 23-25 biennium. Subsection 2 of Section 22 indicates that the approval of the Interim Finance Committee is not required for any work program revisions for the bond interest and redemption account in the Consolidated Bond Interest and Redemption Fund for the bond repayment costs approved by the Nevada Legislature. And then I jumped ahead to Section 23, so we've already covered that section. And we've covered Section 24. Pardon? Oh. Section 25, beginning in Section 25, this section begins the project extensions, and it revises reversionary language in subsection 2 for the projects listed here to allow that the funding authorized for these projects be extended from to June 30th of 2025. These are projects from the 2019 CIP that the committees have approved a 2-year extension. This is also true for Section 26. Again, in subsection 1 requires any unexpended funding be reverted for projects not listed here in subsection 2. And also subsection B authorizes the funds to be transferred for projects listed and described in the executive budget in section 6, and those are the bond reallocation funds of $5 million. So subsection B of subsection 1 authorizes that transfer of funds for those projects. Section 27 is the project extension for a 2021 CIP project, and that extends the reversionary language in that section to June 30th of 2027, which would have otherwise expired in June 30 of 2025. Section 28 appropriates general fund in the amount of $114.2 million for capital improvement programs for the Legislative Council Bureau projects. Section 29, the State Board of Finance shall issue general obligation bonds in the amount of $100 million, or not more than $100 million, for capital improvement projects for the Legislative Council Bureau. Subsection 2 is the same language required of the executive branch, that all state and local government agencies shall cooperate with the Legislative Council Bureau in expediting completion of the capital improvement projects. Section 3 is the reversionary language for any unexpended bond proceeds of the $100 million that they shall revert to the Consolidated Bond Interest and Redemption Fund on or before September 17, 2027. Section 30 authorizes the State Board of Finance to issue the bonds at the time that it deems appropriate based on the schedule of completion of the capital projects for the Legislative Council Bureau. Subsection 2 of Section 30 is the allows the State Controller to advance State General Fund upon the request of the Director of the Legislative Council Bureau until the date is such time as the date of the bonds are sold to facilitate the start of capital improvement projects. Subsection 3 requires the Director of the Legislative Council Bureau to provide written notification to the State Controller, the State Treasurer, and the Senate and Assembly Fiscal Analysts of the Fiscal Analysis Division upon the approval of any advance of the State General Fund to the Legislative Fund. And then the Director of the Legislative Council Bureau must provide a reconciliation to the Legislative Commission and the Senate and Assembly Fiscal Analysts of the Fiscal Analysis Division of any advances authorized from the State General Fund, and as well as the repayment to the State General Fund for that advance. Sections 31 and 32 provide clarifying language related to land owned by the Legislative Council Bureau or the legislature in the Capitol Mall, as well as the legislature's parking garage. And then section 32 indicates that as soon as practicable after approval of this act, the state land registrar shall quit claim to the legislature of the state of Nevada the description in subsection 1 of the land in Carson City. And then also the subsection 2 is the parcels for the buildings in Las Vegas, as well as the 2 parcels of land for the parking. Section 33 is the effective date, which is effective upon passage and approval. And Madam Chair, that concludes the overview of this BDR. And if you have any questions, we're happy to respond.
Thank you so much. These budget bills are huge. We should have a lot of water down there for you guys. Members, any questions on BDR S1211? Seeing none, I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, so moved.
I have a motion from Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second from Assemblywoman Hadigi. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. And looks like our final team made it upstairs. You guys are playing musical rooms today. Our next BDR is BDR S1212. It revises provisions relating to the compensation of state employees. Good evening. And members are getting copies of that BDR as we speak. As soon as they have it all, we can get started. Members, have you all received a copy of BDR S1212? Yes? All right, then we can get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. I'm James Malone, LCB Fiscal for the record. With me is J. Marie Mongoba, and she will assist with walking through the BDR overview this evening. And in the audience is with me Nancy Morris, Yuri Yakovlev, and Daniel Miller, who also assisted with drafting this legislation. And of course, I'd like to thank legal for their assistance as well. BDR S1212 revises provisions relating to the compensation of state employees. This is commonly referred to as the pay bill. Section 1 sets forth the maximum annual salary amounts for employees in the unclassified service of the state. These amounts include the 1% salary increase approved for fiscal year 2023, but do not include any salary increases that may be approved for the 23-25 biennium. The unclassified positions are listed by agency with the exception for certain medical personnel in subsection 42 that are unclassified positions available to multiple agencies. Section 2, which begins all the way on page 34 after the list of the salaries, is standard language that it gets carried over from the prior pay bills. Subsection 1 and 2 allows the Division of Human Resource Management, Department of Administration, to review the duties and responsibilities of a position that may have been omitted from the bill to establish the salary of that position, and allows for corrections to the bill for any errors determined by the Fiscal Analysis Division with the approval of the Interim Finance Committee. Subsections 3 to 6 include standard provisions regarding persons filling or vacating unclassified positions and allows a position to maintain their salary if their current salary is higher than the salary provided in Section 1. So sections 3 through 12 provide salary increases for certain personnel. On bottom of page 35, section 3 provides that the unclassified positions in section 1 will receive a 12% increase in fiscal year 2024 and a 4% salary increase in fiscal year 2025. And section 4 appropriates general funds of $7.8 million in fiscal year 2024 and $10.9 million in fiscal year 2025. And highway funds of $385,236 in fiscal year 2024 and $532,870 in fiscal year 2025 for this purpose. Both Section 5, which begins on page 37, and Section 6, which begins on page 38, provide various salary increases for the classified and non-classified positions in the Executive Department and the Commission on Judicial Discipline, and provides a general fund appropriation of $7.4 million in fiscal year 2024 and $104.7 million in fiscal year 2025, and a highway fund appropriations of $14 million in fiscal year 2024 and $19.7 million in fiscal year 2025. The following summarizes the salary increases for various groups. Subsection 2 of sections 5 and 6, for personnel whose classification has been determined not to be within a bargaining unit, an increase of salary 12% in fiscal year 2024 and 4% in fiscal year 2025. Subsection 3 of sections 5 and 6, for personnel whose classification has been determined to be within the following bargaining units. A, labor, maintenance, custodial, and institutional employees. E, professional employees who provide health care. F, employees other than professional employees that provide health care. G, Category 1 peace officers. And I, Category 3 peace officers. An increase of salary of 13% in fiscal year 2024 and 4% in fiscal year 2025. Subsection 4 of sections 5 and 6. For personnel whose classification has been determined to be within the following bargaining units. B, administrative and clerical employees. C, technical aides to professional employees. D, professional employees who do not provide health care. And J, supervisory employees from all occupational groups. An increase of salary of 12% in fiscal year 2024 and 4% in fiscal year 2025. Subsection 5 of sections 5 and 6. For personnel whose classification has been determined to be within the following bargaining units. H, Category 2 peace officers. K, firefighters. An increase of salary of 10% in fiscal year 2024 and 4% in fiscal year 2025. Subsection 6 of sections 5 and 6 provides a mechanism for any remaining balance of the appropriated funds to carry forward from fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2025 without the interim finance committee approval, and the ability for the appropriated funds to be transferred from fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2024 with the approval of IFC. Section 7, it's on page 40. Section 7, subsections 1 to 5 provides various salary increases for the classified positions for the Nevada system of higher education. The salary increases for the classified personnel align with the salary increases for the bargaining units discussed in sections 5 and 6, and provides a general fund appropriation of $10.1 million in fiscal year 2024 and $14.2 million in fiscal year 2025. Section 7, subsection 6 provides a salary increase not to exceed 12% in fiscal year 2024 and not to exceed 4% in fiscal year 2025, professional employees within the Nevada system of higher education, and a general fund appropriation of $49.6 million in fiscal year 2024 and $68 million in fiscal year 2025 for that purpose. Subsection 7 of Section 6 is carryover language from the 2021 pay bill that indicates that salary increases for the Nevada system of higher education is based on the proportion of appropriations from the state general fund to total revenue within each state-supported budget of the Nevada system of higher education. Subsection 8 of Section 7 provides the authority for the Board of Examiners to disperse the funds to the Nevada system of higher education and restricts the usage of those funds to the increases in salaries provided in Section 7. Subsection 9 of Section 7 allows for any remaining balance of appropriated funds to balance forward from fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2025. Section 8, which begins on page 42. Fiscal staff performed an analysis of budgets in the executive budget that would rely on reserves to fund the salary increases provided in sections 3 and 5 of this act. An estimated $26.1 million over the biennium may be required to keep reserve levels at a 30-day target. Therefore, Section 8 makes a $26.1 million appropriation in fiscal year 2024 with the ability to balance forward remaining funds into fiscal year 2025 for budgets within the executive budget that have authorized reserves or retained earnings to assist in the event they are unable to cover the salary increases with their current revenues or reserves. Section 9, page 43. Similar to the funds provided for budgets who would rely on reserves, fiscal staff performed a similar analysis for budget accounts that do not receive general fund or highway fund appropriations and also do not carry a reserve. Fiscal staff estimates $25.9 million over the biennium may be required to assist these budgets with the salary increases if other funding sources could not cover the increase. Accordingly, Section 9 makes a $25.9 million general fund appropriation with the authority to balance remaining funds to fiscal year 2025 for this purpose. And to clarify, that appropriation would be made in fiscal year 2024. Section 10 on the bottom of page 43 provides a salary increase of 12% fiscal year 2024 and 4% fiscal year 2025 for the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and a general fund appropriation of $313,571 in fiscal year 2024 and $430,638 in fiscal year 2025 for that purpose. Section 11 on page 44 provides a salary increase of 12% in fiscal year 2024 and 4% in fiscal year 2025 for personnel of the Legislative Council Bureau and the Interim Legislative Operations, and a general fund appropriation of $5.9 million in fiscal year 2024 and $8.6 million in fiscal year 2025 for that purpose. Section 12 on page 45 provides a salary increase of 12% in fiscal year 2024 and 4% in fiscal year 2025 for personnel of the Judicial Department and a general fund appropriation of $2.5 million in fiscal year 2024 and $3.6 million in fiscal year 2025 for that purpose. Sections 13 to 20. Sections 13 to 20 follow a similar structure to the salary increases provided in sections 3 to 12, as funds are broken out by certain departments and agencies. The two primary differences is that sections 13 to 20 provide an additional increase of salary increase of 7% in fiscal year 2025 for certain departments, and an additional salary increase not to exceed 7% for entry professionals, and is effective on July 1st, 2023, only in the event that Assembly Bill 498 of this session is not enacted by the legislature or approved by the governor. Assembly Bill 498 provides a cap on an employee's contribution to the public employees retirement system to half normalized costs. The following provides the appropriations for each section. Section 13 on page 46 provides a general fund appropriation of $5.1 million and a highway fund appropriation of $272,801 for unclassified positions in fiscal year 2025. Section 14, page 47, provides a general fund appropriation of $49 million and a highway fund appropriation of $9.3 million for classified and non-classified positions for certain executive branch departments and the Commission on Judicial Discipline. Section 15, page 48, provides a general fund appropriation of $6.7 million in fiscal year 2025 for classified personnel within the Nevada System of Higher Education, and a general fund appropriation of $32.4 million in fiscal year 2025 for professional personnel within the Nevada System of Higher Education. Section 16 on page 49 provides a general fund appropriation of $204,867 in fiscal year 2025 to the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Section 17 on page 50 provides a general fund appropriation of $3.8 million in fiscal year 2025 to the Legislative Fund. Section 18 provides a general fund appropriation of $1.6 million to the Judicial Department. Section 19 on page 51 provides a general fund appropriation of $7.3 million in fiscal year 2025 for budget accounts within the executive budget that have authorized reserves or retained earnings that may need assistance with the salary increase. And Section 20, page 51, provides a general fund appropriation of $7.2 million for budget accounts that do not have general fund or highway fund appropriations or an authorized reserve that may need assistance with the salary increase. And with that, I will pass it to my colleague, J. Marie Mongoba.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, J. Marie Mangoba for the Fiscal Analysis Division. So to continue on page 52, sections 21 to 25 relates to the 1 to 3 grade pay increases, which was approved by the full committee on May 1st, 2023. Starting on section 21, this appropriates from the State General Fund to the State Board of Examiners $852,632 in fiscal year 24 and $858,313 in fiscal year 25, and appropriate State Highway Fund of $331,030 in fiscal year 24 and $341,623 in fiscal year 25 to effect a 1-grade pay increase in the pay plan for certain employees in the classified service. The next page, on page 53, section 22, which appropriates from the State General Fund to the State Board of Examiners $18.4 million in fiscal year 24 and $18.9 million in fiscal year 25 to effect a 2-grade pay increase in the pay plan for certain employees in the classified service. Subsection 2 provides State Highway Fund appropriations to the State Board of Examiners of $4.3 million in fiscal year 24 and $4.4 million in fiscal year 25 for the same purpose. Moving on to section 23 on page 54, this section appropriates State General Fund to the State Board of Examiners of $724,991 in fiscal year 24 and $738,876 in fiscal year 25 to effect a 3-grade pay increase in the pay plan for certain employees in the classified service. Moving on to page 55, section 24 authorizes the Division of Human Resource Management to make corrections in the event that a position classification was inadvertently omitted or the incorrect pay grade increase was provided related to the 1 to 3 grade pay increases with the requirement to submit a report to the Interim Finance Committee. Section 25 is the standard diversion language for the funding provided for the 1 to 3 grade pay increases. To continue, page 56, sections 26 to 30 relates to the bonuses. Starting with section 26, this section appropriates from the State General Fund to the Office of Finance $20.7 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for the payment of retention incentives, or commonly known as the bonuses, of $250 per quarter for employees in the state classified, unclassified, and non-classified service, except for persons whose positions are temporary, intermittent, or seasonal, or are positions for which there is a critical labor shortage. The next page, page 57, section 27 appropriates from the State General Fund to the Legislative Fund $488,000 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for these bonuses for employees in the Legislative Department, except for persons whose positions are for a legislative session or are otherwise temporary, intermittent, or seasonal. Section 28 on page 58 appropriates from the State General Fund to the Public Employees Retirement System, or PERS, $84,000 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for the payment of bonuses for employees of the PERS, except for positions that are temporary, intermittent, or seasonal, or are positioned for which there is a critical labor shortage. Page 59, section 29 appropriates from the State General Fund to the Nevada System of Higher Education $3.5 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for the bonuses for professional positions at NSHE. Continuing on page 60, section 30 appropriates from the State General Fund to the Judicial Department staff salaries budget account, $192,000 for fiscal year 24 and $200,000 in fiscal year 25 for the bonuses. Continuing on page 61, Section 31 amends NRS 218F.510, which is a cleanup language to change the ex officio legislative fiscal officer from the chief of the administrative division to the chief of financial officer to commensurate with the duties of the position. Continuing on page 63, Section 32 amends Chapter 284 of NRS to add a new section to include a plan to encourage continuity of service, or commonly known as longevity. This would provide for an employee, including professional employees of NSHE, with 8 years of continuous state service, semi-annual payment of $100, with an annual increase of $25 in the semi-annual payment for each year of the employee's 9th through 14th years of continuous service, an annual increase of $50 for each year of the employee's 15th through 24th years of continuous service, and an annual increase of $75 for each additional year of continuous service after 24 years, up to a maximum payment of 30 years of continuous state service. Section 33 on page 64 amends NRS 284.3775, and I would note that this is existing language in statute, and the only change that's being made here is the addition of the word longevity in subsection 3 on page 65. So moving on to page 67 is section 34, which amends statute related to the salaries of executive officers at the Public Employees Retirement System, or PERS. This is a cleanup language related to section 44, which I will discuss later in this presentation. On the next page, page 68, section 35 is similar to the previous section I mentioned. This is also a cleanup language related to Section 44, but this is specific for the Executive Officer of the Public Employees Benefit Program, or PEB. On page 69, Section 36 relates to the funding for longevity. Starting with subsection 1, this appropriates from the State General Fund to the State Board of Examiners $2.6 million in fiscal year 24, $3.0 million in fiscal year 25 for longevity payments for classified, unclassified, and non-classified employees in the state. Subsection 2 appropriates from the State Highway Fund to the State Board of Examiners $1.3 million in fiscal year 24 and $1.5 million in fiscal year 25. Subsection 3 appropriates from the State General Fund to the State Board of Examiners $2.6 million in fiscal year 24 and $2.9 million in fiscal year 25 for classified and professional employees of the Nevada System of Higher Education. Subsection 4 appropriates from the State General Fund to the State Board of Examiners $692,361 in fiscal year 24 for eligible employees whose positions are funded from budget accounts that have authorized reserves and retained earnings. Subsection 5 appropriates from the State General Fund to the State Board of Examiners $687,311 for fiscal year 24 for employees whose positions are funded from budget accounts that do not have authorized reserves or retained earnings and do not receive any appropriations from the State General Fund or State Highway Fund. Subsection 6 appropriates from the State General Fund to the Judicial Department staff salaries budget account $87,808 in fiscal year 24 and $98,711 in fiscal year 25. And subsection 7 on page 71 appropriates from the State General Fund to the Legislative Fund $154,248 in fiscal year 24 and $173,606 in fiscal year 25. Subsections 8 and 9 are standard reversion language. Continuing on section 37, this is also a standard language that governs the distribution of monies by the State Board of Examiners. Continuing on page 72, section 38 is also a standard reversion language requiring the funds to revert to the general fund at the end of fiscal year 25. On page 73, section 39 is also a standard language that governs the distribution of monies by the State Board of Examiners related to the additional 7% salary increase, and this was carved out from the previous sections because this is contingent upon AB 498. Similar to section 39, section 40 is also a standard reversion language for the additional 7% salary increase in fiscal year 25. Page 74, section 41 is a carryover language from the 2021 pay bill related to the plans for on-call pay for the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Corrections for physicians or pharmacist positions. Section 42 on page 74 is also a carryover language from the 2021 pay bill related to plans for credential pay for the Gaming Control Board. Next page, page 75, section 43 is a standard language to align position name changes enacted by the legislature this session through other bills with the position names on the pay bill. Section 44, as I indicated previously in sections 34 and 35, section 44 repeals NRS 281.123, which requires the salary of a person employed by the state not to exceed 95% of the salary of the governor. Section 45 just provides the effective dates of certain sections in this bill. And that concludes the presentation of the pay bill. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much to the two of you. That was a lot. Members, any questions for our presenters on this BDR, BDRS 1212? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, so moved.
Second.
I have a first from Assemblywoman Backus, a second from Assemblyman Watts. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And for all of our staff, they're not all in the room, thank you so much. There's a few pieces of paper, but this took many, many late hours and early mornings and weekends, texts and calls and work. Thank you all for getting us to this point. We truly appreciate you. And members, I believe that brings us to the end of this agenda. We didn't get any more bills while we were sitting here, right? All right. Okay, so I guess we could go to public comment. If there's anyone in the room that'd like to make public comment. Seeing none, not seeing anyone in Las Vegas. BPS, do we have anyone joining us on the phone line that might want to make public comment tonight?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good evening, Chris Bailey, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. Last week, nearly 1,000 educators and supporters rallied in front of the legislature, umbrellas in hand, to say it's a rainy day in Nevada. And so it's time for 20, meaning 20% raises for every Nevada educator, starting pay of $20 an hour, and average class sizes of 20 students. Certainly Nevada's strong economy and record revenue is welcome news, but it's still a rainy day for Nevada schools. Nevada ranks 48th in education funding, even behind Mississippi, and everyone knows Nevada has the largest class sizes in the nation. The crisis of educator vacancies has reached a tipping point. In the last 2 years, Nevada will lose more than 15% of our teaching workforce. We also have a serious problem with vacancies in classified positions, meaning we're short people who make our schools run. The severe educator shortage threatens the basic function of our school system. It's a rainy day for Nevada schools. The proposed K-12 budget is an increase of 26% over this biennium and $318 million more than the governor's recommendation. While that is promising, this news is blunted by minimal increases in previous years that also had record inflation, eating away most of these proposed increases. Along with this, the budget also raises the education stabilization account cap from 15 to 20%, which would stash away an additional $322 million, meaning the legislature has adjusted GovRec with a larger increase for reserves than for our schools. It turns out the biggest beneficiary of additional funding are charters, with 41% increase in the biennium worth over $400 million, while on the other side of the ledger, Story County will lose 5% of its total budget. Sadly, the rising tide will not lift all boats. When combining the Education Stabilization Account with the state's rainy day fund, reserves could approach nearly $3 billion next biennium, 7 times the state's previous high of $401 million. NSEA believes it's fiscally irresponsible to underfund education and overinflate reserves when we can't retain educators or fill their positions when they leave. Throughout this session, you've heard from a parade of educators about the hardships of working in education with low pay and increasingly stressful working conditions. And last week, educators showed up with the thunder and the lightning. We implore you to redirect monies from rainy day reserves to fund Time for 20. It's a rainy day for Nevada schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Chair, there are no additional callers at this time.
Thank you so much. So with that, members, I think that we can finally adjourn for the day, and I will see you all on the floor.